Welcome to the Caribbean Sea Fan Festival online in celebration of UN World Oceans Day, June 8, 2017, where we explore the life and times of the Caribbean Sea and hear stories from a few of the people working to ensure the sustainable health and wealth of the sea. Stay tuned for information, education, and inspirational stories brought to you by the Sustainable Caribbean Sea Initiative, curated by Dr. Claire Nelson. Life needs the Caribbean Sea.
Greetings and welcome to another segment of the Caribbean Sea Festival. And yes, you might wonder, well, where is she? Doesn't look like she's inside. Because no, I'm actually at a beach resort in the fabulous island of Haiti, where I'm here celebrating the Haiti Tech Summit, the first annual Haiti Tech Summit. Now, in this next series of conversations, we'll be talking to young people who are leaders in the Caribbean Youth Environment Network. We'll be visiting with them from Barbados to Grenada to Guyana to St. Kitts, and actually one was actually in Malta when I taped him. But right now, let me introduce you to KERRICIA HOBSON from Grenada. Grenada is going through a very interesting period of change. They are moving from being known as a spice island, known for pimento and cinnamon and other exotic spices, to becoming known as a world leader in the blue economy. Yes, that's right. Grenada has a plan to have its national strategy based on blue growth. You heard the term first here, blue growth. Now stay tuned as we hear from KERRICIA HOBSON, who in her daytime job is a coastal environmental specialist, and of course in her after-work time is a leader in the Caribbean Youth Environment Network, the Grenada chapter. Stay tuned. Greetings and welcome to the Caribbean Sea Fan Festival. We've been taking a cruise around the Caribbean region, speaking with some of the people who are emerging leaders working on issues pertaining to the Caribbean Sea. This segment we'll be visiting with Grenada, and in particular with KERRICIA HOBSON, who serves as the interim coordinator for the national chapter of the Caribbean Youth Environment Network in Grenada. And when she's not busy trying to organize young people to get engaged, she also works as a project manager for the coral reef restoration and management and conservation and all the great things we're going to hear about. Now, we know that the coral reefs are very critical to a sustainable blue sea, a sustainable blue economy. And so we're eager to hear from KERRICIA what she thinks about her work and how her work will advance the sustainable blue economy. So greetings and good morning, KERRICIA.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Of course, by the time the people hear this, it may not be morning. Who knows? As you know, we're doing this conversation around our celebration of UN World Ocean Day in the Caribbean region. And the Sea Fan Festival is intended to let all ideas contend. And this year, our focus is on the Caribbean blue economy. Now, Grenada has kind of taken off like a rocket, or should we say like a rocket boat, or whatever is the fastest boat, a speedboat, in trying to lead the way for the Caribbean region on looking at the ocean as a space for serious economic development and sustainable economic development, clearly if you are busy working on coral reef. I want to start by what is your gut reaction when you hear the words the Caribbean blue economy?
Well, it speaks to the heart of everything that we are as a Caribbean, if I'm to be honest, because we may not have called it blue economy before, but our entire economy is really based on the marine environment. To a very large extent, our islands depend on tourism, and the tourism product is based on the assets that we have in the marine space. So in a very real way, blue economy is a new term, but it's something we've been doing almost all our lives.
Well, that said, I know that, well, Grenada is a much smaller island than Jamaica. I have been to Grenada. But so it may be that your relationship with the sea is very different from ours in Jamaica. So when did you first fall in love with the Caribbean Sea?
Oh, at a very, very, very young age. I remember my parents telling me that they used to have to watch me very, very carefully on the beaches because I would always sneak off into the water. But I've always been fascinated by the ocean, the vastness of it. And it was so blue and beautiful. So from the time I've known myself, I think I've been in love with the sea.
Now you're working on coral reefs,
Yes.
and I'm having a little sound distortion here, so I'm hoping I can, maybe you should come a little bit closer to the mic. Come a little bit closer and let's see if we have less of it. Yeah. Yeah, so do you dive? I mean, you're working on coral reef, so do you dive? Hello? 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 Okay, I think we have lost her. So tell me, you're working on coral reef. Is the coral reef restoration or coral reef management?
Both. We're doing
Both. Okay.
research and management.
Before I go into the science of that, do you dive?
I do.
Now, how did you get into diving? Because very few Caribbean people are scuba dive.
Well, it started with my love for the sea. And when I chose to do my bachelor's, I decided to do marine biology. And so as part of the program, we had an opportunity to become certified. And through that opportunity, I became scuba certified. So while I was doing my bachelor's.
Well, the thing is that you don't look like my stereotype of a marine biologist. Look at your hair, for example. It's not supposed to look so neat and tidy and conservative. Marine biologists are supposed to be kind of out there, you know, like, what happened to you?
That's because I chose to depart from the marine biology. So even though I did my undergrad in science, when I had an opportunity to do my master's, I chose to do something a little different. And so actually my master's is in development studies. So I went into social sciences, and that's why I'm where I am now, because I did my master's in development studies and I did environment and sustainable development. And so what I look to do right now is to intertwine my science base with tackling development problems in the Caribbean space in particular.
Right. So then you really bring a very personal touch because you're a diver to the whole issue of coral reef restoration and management. Now let me see. You're still fairly young, but have you seen any difference in the the state of the reefs since the time you first started diving compared to now?
Well, the problem with being a diver is that you tend to get taken to areas that look relatively decent. So until I started working on this project, a lot of the spaces that I've been to have been relatively pristine spaces, or at least, not doing too badly. And so there hadn't been too big of a difference between the way they looked 10 years ago and the way they look now.
So what is so important about your work that you're doing now in coral reef restoration and management? Why is this important?
The biggest reason why we decided to engage in reef restoration is because we acknowledge the fact that, well, two things mainly. One, that our economies depend so heavily on tourism and fisheries as economic sectors that provide livelihoods and income to the country. So once we recognize that, we also recognize that our tourism products and a lot of our fisheries stock depend on our ecosystems, and our marine ecosystems in particular. But our initial approach to climate change adaptation, which is the broad area within which I work right now, is that we tend to do more what we call hard engineering solutions to climate change issues like coastal erosion. And that is not particularly helpful for our marine assets. Most times when you install a seawall, for instance, you tend to lose the beaches that back it. It's a very smart approach for a country that is dependent on our beaches, for instance, as part of.
So what exactly, when I hear seawall, I'm thinking of Guyana and Holland. What would a seawall in an island like Grenada look like?
Well, I mean, right now, if you travel along our western coast, the majority of that coast has been modified with seawall. So it's a similar structure to what is installed in Guyana, just on a smaller scale and not so straight because our coast is a little bit more curvaceous.
So is it that you really I mean, in Ghana the issue is that the sea level is lower than the land level is lower than the sea level. Is that the case in Grenada as well?
The Grenada's case was specifically driven by a storm surge that we had back in 1999 due to Hurricane Lenny, which decimated the majority of the western coast of the island.
Wow.
So, and as with most small islands, our infrastructure is along the coast. So all the roads, there are a lot of homes, a lot of businesses on the coast of the country. And so with the storm surge and so much deterioration that occurred to the coast, there was a need to have a almost immediate intervention. So before that, we've had small pockets of interventions, hard infrastructure interventions. But since 1999 moving forward, it has almost been our dominant approach to how we
so what exactly is involved in coral reef restoration as you're practicing it? Are you putting in, I've heard about like scaffolding structures that can be let's say the basis for new reefs being formed. Is that the kind of work that you're doing?
Well, that's one type of reef, but that's not what we're doing right now. What we are trying to do is to work with our existing reef structures. So the idea behind it, and this is the concept of ecosystem-based adaptation, which is a soft engineering solution. What we are saying is that when our ecosystems are healthy, or robust is the word we like to use, but when they are healthy, they are able to cope with changes better. And if they're coping well, then they help us. So what we are doing is we're working with existing reef structures and we're trying to restore them. So the concept is
but a reef is a living thing. So first of all, I'm an engineer. So when I hear like soft engineering and hard engineering, I'm like, okay. So I guess hard engineering would be like, okay, I'm gonna go get me some steel and iron and build a wall.
So the other way to look at it is gray engineering versus green engineering. So gray engineering would be non-living structures and green engineering would be living structures. So that's why we call it soft. Because the idea is that hard engineering or gray engineering require additional funding to maintain. You can't just build something, you have to maintain it. Now the idea is that it's—
which should be a challenge for a small country to maintain. Gotcha.
No. Green engineering, which is essentially working with nature, is a cheaper option in the interim, in the first instance. And in the second instance, if you're able to maintain the structure so that it's healthy, it maintains itself. So you have to do very little to help it to thrive.
Oh yeah, because the sea was maintaining itself more or less, I wouldn't say unchanged because we weren't there, but the sea was maintaining itself more or less for years, and the island has been around for hundreds of years. Now, in our lifetime, you're saying we've seen, I heard about Hurricane Ivan, I didn't hear about the other hurricane.
Right.
So I wasn't aware that there was devastation, a different type of devastation. In Ivan, we heard about, tree loss and as everything being mashed up, as I put it, Governor General House, Prime Minister House. And what was fascinating about that, I must this is an aside, was that I remember the diaspora, the Grenadian diaspora and the Caribbean diaspora coming together to do fundraising for Ivan back in the day. And one of the most fascinating pieces of news was that the prisoners who had been escaped because of the Hurricane Ivan had called the authorities to let them know where they were and that they were turning themselves anywhere and provisions were made. I just thought that was hilarious. So we see we're already into green engineering, even in the social spaces. I don't think it's what happened in Jamaica that they would turn. It's like, so when I'm hearing green engineering now and the reefs, and I'm thinking of the reef, first of all, for me to even get the idea of the reef corals as animals is the first thing that we have to wrap our head around.
Right.
Because when we typically think of animals the way we're taught in schools, we're thinking of, cats, dogs,
right,
things that we can see. Now, if you said the coral was an insect, then it might be more, we could probably buy that more because at least it's probably so tiny we can't see it. So, but the coral is a living animal. So how are you going to engineer it?
Well, we're not engineering the animal itself. So
Okay.
corals are very special. They are animals. The coral polyp, which is the actual organism, is an animal. But it lives, think about
How do you know it's an animal? I mean, really? Does it have lungs?
well, it's not that sort of developed, but the characteristics that we use to differentiate between an animal and a plant is what allows us to call corals animals. And the biggest differentiation between an animal and a plant is how they get their food. Plants are able to make their own food.
Ah.
Animals must eat something in order to get.
So the corals actually eat something.
They do. They do.
So what do they eat?
Well, they eat very microscopic organisms.
Ah.
So but they're carnivores. So they eat very tiny animals, smaller than them, like one-celled animals that float around in the water that we don't see with our eyes. They eat that. But
It's amazing.
So they're special.
Amazing. I'm sorry to distract you, but I'm just amazed. I learned so much from these conversations. So green engineering, then you're doing what?
So what we are doing is actually using the concept of nurseries, which we're very familiar with. So we know about nurseries on land, for instance, or even nurseries at home. What we do in our project is that we construct nursery structures in the water, and on those structures, we care for small fragments of coral. The corals are able to grow from small cuttings, and we use those fragments and allow them to grow. And when they're big enough, we monitor them and we maintain them. And when they're large enough, we snip them off and we reattach them to existing reef structures.
Ah, so it's like mango tree grafting, quote unquote.
Yes, but without the grafting.
Think about that mango tree grafting. So I don't know why I went there, but basically, you cut us. For those of us who are a little bit challenged about the sea, like I am, so we get a snippet of the coral, we put it somewhere else, it quote unquote grows little roots and starts to grow.
Well, so not roots, but yes, it grows.
Well, I'm calling my roots.
Right.
Things that okay, some of us won't ever to dive, right? So we have to and we're trying here valiantly to help people understand why they shouldn't, like throw plastic in the sea. And this is connected. It is connected, is it not?
Yes, it is, very much so.
Because if we cut through plastic in the sea, aren't we helping to destroy the reefs?
Yes, we are. But especially on islands, the linkage between what happens on land and what happens in the ocean is so much easier to see. So that beyond things like littering is a big problem. Because when it rains, for instance, it takes about 10 to 20 minutes in an island the size of Grenada, which is only about 12 miles long. It takes about 10 to 20 minutes, depending on how heavy the shower is, to wash all of it out into the sea. When these things get onto our reefs, for instance, they choke them. So not just the plastic waste, but also, for example, excess sediments, excess mud and silt floating them into the ocean.
Wow.
It actually prevents the reefs from, so that's why I was trying to explain a little bit more about corals, because they're fascinating. They're not just animals, but they're animals who formed a relationship. If you throw yourselves back to Form 3 biology, we talk about symbiotic relationships.
Mm-hmm.
It's formed a symbiotic relationship with a plant. So the reason why corals are beautiful colors is because of the plants that grow within them. So corals actually secrete a limestone structure. So it tends to be kind of hard, like a stone.
Yeah.
And so the plants live within the stones for protection, because if they're floating around in the water, somebody will eat them or something will eat them. So it lives within the corals for protection. And as part of that relationship, because they get protection, they provide additional food to the corals. And that's what gives the corals the beautiful colors. But because we're talking about plants living in the corals, plants make food through sunlight. And so when you have excess sediments, all this garbage that settles on our reefs, we, for instance, block the sun from being able to reach the reef. And if it can't reach the reef, then the plants are not able to produce food. And if they're not able to produce food, then it's not able to share that food with the corals.
Now, how does that tie into fish?
Well,
because most of us, our relationship is just with fish.
With fish, okay.
That we eat.
Fish need
like
to live.
escovitch snapper.
Right. Now, fish need to live somewhere, right? They need homes. And the biggest pull or the biggest contribution that coral reefs play towards fisheries is that it provides home for fish. Now, it goes hand in hand with all our other marine ecosystems. We have our mangroves, we have our seagrasses, and we have, well, other ecosystems, but those three together are the main ones. So coral reefs, mangroves, seagrasses. Mangroves and seagrasses play a very important role in providing nursery spaces for fish. So as small fish, it gives them an opportunity to grow large enough so that they can grow and reproduce. When they get large enough, most times they go out to the coral reefs. So they live among the reef area. When they live, they need spaces to live. And so reefs are not just static structures. They're very large. Think about, we call them the forest of the seas. So think about trees and how the branches grow in different directions, and the way the tree grows provides spaces for different types of animals to live. It's the same concept with our reefs. So that's where it becomes really important for fish, because the intricate structures of the reef is what creates homes for species.
Now, as we think about the future, because the point of talking to young people like yourself, working in this space, is that you are going to be certainly doing this for the next 13 years, I would hope. And as we look at the Sustainable Development Goals and the goals for sustainable living oceans, and we know that the blue economy for the Caribbean region is about 53 billion. I don't know how much it contributes to your economy. You might know that. But I guess my question would be, how do you see success? What does success look like for you in 2030? In other words, are you still gonna have a job in 2030? Or will your job be different based on what you are doing now?
Well, I expect it to evolve. But what we are trying to establish right now is that, so you rightly said that it's below the sea. A lot of us have no clue what's happening below the water. And what we are trying to do through our project is actually to create an opportunity to demonstrate how important what happens under the ocean is for us. So we have two parts to this. One is a demonstration part, showing people physically. So we take a lot of pictures and videos, and we go out into the communities and we speak to them. I mean, a big part of our program is community involvement. So one of the things we've done is we've hired persons in the community and trained them to be scuba divers. They're the ones who are responsible for maintaining our coral nurseries.
Do you have to be able to swim to be a scuba diver?
It helps if you're able to swim, but it's more important if you can at least float. It's a skill you can learn, though. It's a skill you can learn.
I hope at the end of this conversation, or end of today, World Ocean Day, I love the sea, but I'm terrified of the sea. I'm sure I've drowned in a former life or something. But it's interesting that most Caribbean people are afraid of the sea. I don't know if it's because we have lost so many people to the sea. I don't know how much of it is historic because of our slave past, and we've been taught to fear the sea. But on that note, taking a total shift, in terms of your community outreach, are you finding a lot of artists then and writers doing more work related to the sea? Because it's very hard for me to find poetry or stories or, songs about the sea. Are you finding more people doing this now that you're doing this work?
Well, and I'm not taking my project in isolation. There are other activities happening on the island, for instance, that revolve around coastal ecosystems and the need to protect and conserve. So within my project, for instance, we have worked with communities. So we're working with two particular communities with the spaces within which we are doing reef restoration. And in one particular community, the young people came together and they wrote a poem, for instance, that they performed when we launched the program.
I'd love to see that.
I would love, I'll get it.
I hear it.
Once I get a copy, I can share that with you. But in addition to which, for instance, we have another project, which is like our flagship climate change adaptation project here in Grenada. And it's called Integrated Climate Change Adaptation Strategies. And under that project, one of the highlights of that is that they provided a community adaptation fund, where communities and small NGOs, small community-based organizations were able to write in to access funding to implement their own measures to assist with climate change adaptation. And one of the highlights of that right now, as you speak about poetry, for instance, is one of the small theater companies on the island wrote in to access funding, and what they are currently doing, they developed a play, and they are doing it, they're enacting it in various communities.
Oh.
It involves them getting the community members involved in the actual renditions of the
No,
play.
you see, now that's something I think we'd love to see shared, because one of our challenges going forward is to really rapidly, I'm one of these people who don't believe we have 13 years to take our time to do this. I do think we need a very rapid influx of information for this paradigm shift to happen, because we really have a big challenge in the Caribbean region with waste management, solid and liquid, and it is impacting on our sea. And if we are not careful, we will have a dead sea in 13 years. So we do need to have a rapid influx. And things like that program with the theater, I think, will be very important to be replicated. So as we close out, how are you hoping to replicate what's happening in Grenada, or share what's happening in Grenada? You're a member of a youth network that's regional. How do you share your learning with other young people across the region?
Well, one of the ways that we've started to do so is visualization. So part of the reason why the sea is so abstract to us is because we don't know what's happening below there. So we spend a lot of effort and time and effort into documenting what's happening under the ocean. We take lots of pictures, lots of short videos, and we use that in presentations, for instance. The other approach that we've had has been this community involvement. So for instance, training community members to be scuba divers who are actively involved in the program. They end up being our best advocates for the work, because they live in the areas, they know best what's happening in the areas, and they know the people that they live with. And so when they are able to passionately speak about what they do, I mean, part of their training involved them learning to do community presentations and other presentations. So we have a school program. They go to the schools and they tell students about what they do, part of the package.
Yeah, I think I really am liking the sound of this. I really hope that as this is aired and as we play it over the next 3 months, because we do want to be very aggressive in trying to get what the young people are doing in the region more visible, and seeing how we can get more funding, because it boils down to out of sight, out of mind. A lot of what you're doing is out of sight of most people.
Right.
Well, and the sea is certainly out of sight of all of us. I mean, go to the beach. I know people who go to the beach and they don't ever go in the water.
Yes.
They don't like the salt water there. They're afraid of the seaweeds, and they don't want to get their hair wet. So it's a challenge. So we need to have a very rapid, what you're doing in terms of prototyping. We need to come up with a way in which the Youth Environment Network can have a more vibrant platform for exchange, that your whole communication strategy as a network can be such that there's constant exchange of information and making it available to a broader audience. I mean, we're trying to partner with Caribbean Vision TV, for example, to get the word of this thing out. But again, they themselves don't have funding to kind of push it at the level to push. So we really need a grassroots movement. And what you're doing with young people, I think, can begin to create a grassroots movement. So as we wrap up, go ahead.
So Caribbean Youth Environment Network is one of the partners that we're working with, because what we're doing here in Grenada was not meant to be just for Grenada. So it was a pilot. And what we've done is we've taken a lot of time in terms of designing a program that we think can translate. One of the highlights, for instance, is that we have been able to break down significantly a lot of these scientific, technical, heavy concepts for community members, persons who may not have necessarily finished high school, and they are able to understand the basic science and be a part of the program.
Very, very important. One of the things I complain about is that our policymakers and our technocrats like to think that people who did not go to college are stupid. They are not stupid. They're half of them are highly intelligent. I spoke to a fisherman once, and he told me he navigated from Jamaica to Pedro Banks, wherever the place is, with the stars. And I'm saying, okay, I can't even name a star. So, I mean, they have intellectual capacity in the areas that they're familiar. And so your work is highly fascinating in terms of training the young people to not only to learn to dive, but to understand what they're seeing when they're diving. Train them that they can internalize the information
Right.
and use it to train the next generation. So
Right.
notice in social change theory, we need 10% of the population. So if you're moving Grenada towards a blue economy, what would be 10% of your population?
Well, 10% would probably include maybe at least half of the coastal communities. So something like this would specifically target coastal communities.
And that's 15,000 people? How many people you have in?
It's about 110,000.
Right. So you really don't have that much problem. You only have 11,000 to convince.
Right.
You're doing, let's say, you know, so how long are those trainings?
So I wanted to say that what we're doing is because we want to share this information, we want to export it to the Caribbean, we spent a lot of time trying to document and design a program. And so as part of that program, we trained the community members, and that took us approximately a year. Now the training doesn't have to roll out within a year, but it took us a year because we were trying to refine the methodology and make sure that what we were teaching made sense to the people.
But it not in terms of translating it, how long would it take if I said, okay, let's go to Jamaica and do a test case? How long would that take?
Depending on how often the persons are willing to come out, within a month to 2 months, you can properly train.
All right. So if we had diving equipment for 30 people, you don't want to be larger than 30 ever, because you won't get, one day a month, everybody's doing something, in charge of something. Then it will take you a year to get to 360 people. That's not bad if it's on doing one location.
Right.
So I think if you have support and we can get the Grenadian diaspora who may eventually watch this, we certainly want to get the diaspora to watch it. The reason why we at ICS as a Caribbean diaspora organization is doing this, because we want to bring the diaspora in to support what you're doing. Okay. So, we want you to be able to make an appeal to the diaspora to say, hey, we need your support in funding equipment for these high schools that are near the coast,
right?
Be able to do this work. So as we wrap up, tell me, what would be one thing that you would like to ask the diaspora to support?
I would like to ask the diaspora in particular to support the work on the ground through, so what we are in the process of doing is rolling out a sustainability plan. So there are options. You can, for instance, contribute to the ecotourism part of it by starting a small business or helping somebody in Grenada to start a small business. There are a number of small business opportunities that have come out as livelihood options from the work that we're doing. So for instance, glass bottom boats as tours, as touring opportunities to see the spaces that can become a big thing. We have one locally owned dive shop in Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique. One. We have about 7 or 8 dive shops in total, only one locally owned. That's an opportunity to start a dive shop and use that as an opportunity to tour, not just in nurseries, take divers out to the nurseries, but also out onto the reefs. So we have livelihood options. We also have opportunities to partner. And I think even in the very interim now, that's a good opportunity. So for instance, we're going to be instituting Adopt a Tree, Adopt a Table programs where you can contribute as little as 20 US and adopt a tree, and as your contribution on a monthly basis to help maintain the work that we're doing. Because what we want to do is to make sure that the persons we were able to hire through the program are able to continue, and not just continue here in Grenada, but have an opportunity to go to other places and help them start their own programs. So those two in particular are the ones that I think that the diaspora has an opportunity to get involved in and to help spread the word. Because the more persons know about the work that we're doing in Grenada, the more opportunities we have to get additional funding and to move we are at the stage where we would like to expand and replicate not just in Grenada, but across the Caribbean region. Because what happens in Grenada, in our marine space, affects what happens in St. Vincent, affects what happens in Dominica. We share the Caribbean basin, and our resources, therefore, are shared resources. And so if one is doing well, and we get another one to do well, then we all benefit.
Yes, we all benefit. Thank you so much for that. And your final statement will be, begin with these 3 words. My life needs the Caribbean Sea because. Complete that sentence.
My life needs the Caribbean Sea because without the ocean, we have no life.
Thank you so much for that profound statement, and it's quite true. The ocean are the lungs of the planet. Without the ocean, we as humanity would be toast. So we need to take better care of the ocean. Thank you very much, Mr. Hobson. for being a part of this series of conversations about the future of the Caribbean Sea, about the health of the Caribbean Sea on this UN World Ocean Day 2017. KERRICIA HOBSON is the Interim National Coordinator for the Grenada chapter of the Caribbean Youth Environment Network and the project manager of the Coastal Restoration and Management Program in Grenada. Thank you again, and smooth sailing across the blue Caribbean Sea.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this segment of the Caribbean Sea Fan Festival Online 2017. The festival is a virtual cruise around the Caribbean to hear stories about the life and times of the Caribbean Sea from people who love and care for the sea. The Caribbean Sea Fan Festival Online is a production of the Institute of Caribbean Studies in Washington, D.C. For more information, visit www.thecaribbeansea.org. Share this story and see more. Remember, life needs the Caribbean Sea.